Hello everyone. So this is going to be seventh and last lecture in series of our discussion on Parliament. In past we already had delivered 6 lectures and 6 lengthy lectures rather. So in the first video we discussed both houses of the Parliament, that is Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. In the second video we discussed in a detailed manner what is the first past post system, what is proportional representation system. We compared both method of election. In the third video we discussed presiding officer of both houses, that is Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, deputy speaker, then chairman, deputy chairman and panels of chairperson of the Lok Sabha. So all these things we already have discussed. In the fourth video we discussed the legislative process, how an idea goes on to become act, what is the process that is followed, and in the same video we had discussed types of bill, ordinary bill, constitutional amendment bill, then money bill, the difference between them. Then in the fifth video we discussed privileges and immunities that is available to our member of parliament under article 105. In the sixth video we discussed different kind of motion, that is called devices of parliamentary proceedings. So we discussed here question hour, what is question hour, what is 0 hour, what are different kind of motion. What is the scope of this video? The scope of video is few leftover topic that we could not discuss while discussing all these topics. So whatever topic that has been left over that could not be accommodated with the flow of these topics, we'll discuss those topics, right? So if we talk about the scope of this chapter, the scope is like this. So in the motion, while we were covering the motion, we could not discuss what is this cut motion, right? Then different type of leaders in the house. So we'll discuss what is the leader of the house, what is leader of opposition, what is whip, leader of whip. Then multifunctional role of parliament we could not discuss, what is this quorum we could not discuss, and in the last leg as always we'll put up some MCQs, right? So I hope you would have understood the scope of this video. Let us move to the next slide and let us discuss the first leg, that is motions, right? And as part of motion we have to discuss this cut motion. So if you remember from the previous slide or previous video rather, right, what was the motion? So motion is nothing, motion is a tool in the hands of these parliamentarians, or rather in assembly as well, the elected representative. This is a tool in the hand of these elected representative through which they express their opinion, they express their views on a matter of general public importance. If I give you another definition of the motion, so motion can be called as a tool to ensure executive accountability towards legislature. How this motion ensures executive accountability towards the legislature, we will discuss this, right? So as part of motion, if you remember in the previous video, we already have discussed all these kind of motion. What is this no confidence motion, what is this adjournment motion, what is this privilege motion, what is this calling attention motion, what is this censure motion, right? So all these motions we had discussed, but we forgot to discuss this cut motion, right? So these motions are, again I am telling you, these motions are nothing, right? By moving this no confidence motion, or by moving this privilege motion, or by moving this adjournment motion, what legislatures are essentially trying to do is that they are trying to keep these executives on toe, right? So this executive makes any mistake and you come up with this calling attention motion. You have lengthy discussion through the media or through the parliamentary floor, right? These legislature can show that executive has, through these questions or through discussion and debates, right, that does happen during the censure motion or calling attention motion, or through this adjournment motion. So whatever discussion or whatever debate that goes on during these motions, right, these executives are put on toes, right, for whatever mistake or whatever manipulation. So privilege motion, what was this privilege motion, if you remember? So if any minister, even this can be filed against the private member as well, but most of the time, so if any minister has given any wrong statement, any manipulative statement, any distorted information, if any member of executive has provided to the house in order to manipulate the house, right, then this privilege motion is moved, right? So these motions are, again I am telling you, nothing but this is a tool to keep executive on its toes, and that's why this motions ensures executive accountability. So one answer you would already have got. Now without further wasting time, let us start discussing this cut motion. So cut motion is nothing but part of budget. So if you know, the legislature has this duty to reduce the amount of budget. See, executives, this budget is nothing but budget is prepared by the executive, and executive would always like to expend the amount of budget, right? So if the budget size of financial year 2018-19 was 26 lakh crore, right? The next government or for the next year they would like that okay, budget should be approved of 28 lakh crore. Next year they would like that it should be 30 lakh crore. Now it is the job. So this is the attempt of executive to maximize the size of budget as much as possible. Even every ministry, this I was talking at the level of government, even every ministry, if you see Ministry of Social Justice, Ministry of Human Resource Development, Ministry of Science and Technology, so every ministry has this competition that how much budget I can or how much amount I can get approved through this budget. But it is now the duty of legislature to ensure or to oppose unnecessary expenditure made by the government through budgetary demand. So you do have something called demand of grant, and through demand of grant and through this demand of grant every ministry expresses its desire. It expresses that these many schemes I have to run, and for running that scheme I need this much amount. So somebody will ask I need 10 lakh crores, somebody will ask I need 2 lakh crores, somebody will ask previous year you had given us 1.5 lakh crore, this year I am expecting 2 lakh crore, right? So that budget maximization thing is the attempt of the executive. Now it is the duty of these legislatures to ensure that whatever amount that this executive is asking, right, whether that amount is legitimately needed or that is just an exaggeration, right? So these are the tools. This cut motion is nothing but this cut motion. So if party in the opposition or if any member of the legislature feels that whatever amount that is being demanded by Ministry of Defense, so suppose in wake of these continuous Chinese incursion or in wake of this continuous Pakistani threat, right, if the Ministry of Defense this year says that okay, because of possible war that we may have in next 4 or 5 years with China, right, we need to allocate more funds, more and more increased funds to what you call Ministry of Defense. So until now you had been giving us 50,000 crores, 50k crores. Now this year because of this Chinese threat that is impending, a Chinese war, you sanction 70,000 crores to us, right? So any legislature may rise from his position and he may say that yes, whatever demand the Ministry of Defense is asking for in wake of this increased Chinese intrusion and impending war in next 4 or 5 years, their demands are correct. But right now our focus should be creation of more and more jobs because of the unemployment that has been created due to this lockdown and COVID crisis. So we should be prioritizing demand of grant of MSME ministry rather than Ministry of Defense because we do have limited budget, right? So to move these kind of motion, to move these cut motion, we do have 3 sub-categorization: policy cut, economy cut and token cut, right? What are the nuances of this policy cut? What is the nuances of economy cut? What is the nuances of token cut? We'll see in the next slide, right? Legislature does have duty to oppose unnecessary expenditure made by the government through budgetary demand, right? This motion can be moved only in the Lok Sabha, not in the Rajya Sabha. Only in the Lok Sabha, not in the Rajya Sabha, because if you remember, right, budget is nothing, budget is a money bill, and when we were discussing the money bill, Article 110 and Article 109, in Article 109 it is clearly mentioned that in regards to the money bill, Rajya Sabha will have limited power. So I hope this thing we would have understood that why these 3 motions can be moved only in the Lok Sabha. There are other motions as well, right? In the previous slide, if you remember, right, there are other motions like no confidence motion, this censure motions. All these motions can be moved only in the Lok Sabha. So this cut motion as well can be moved only in the Lok Sabha. So this motion is moved by the members in the Lok Sabha to express their displeasure over the demand of grant made by various ministry. We already have discussed this. Let us get into next slide and let us start discussing this. What is this policy cut? What is this economic cut? And what is this token cut, right? So here you have a new information, and the new information is that along with these motions, right, here are other tools, that is question hour, that committee and the discussion. So these are nothing but tools of accountability through the motion, various motion that legislature move, through the question hour, the question that they ask during the question hour, through the committee system, through the debate and discussion that they do have in parliament, legislature try to ensure executive accountability. So I hope this thing you would have understood. Let us move to the next slide and let us start discussing what is this policy cut. So what is this policy cut? So policy cut is nothing. So suppose any ministry for the poverty alleviation program has brought up a policy named A, right? So policies are nothing but a tool to achieve some objective. So the objective is poverty alleviation, right? So it has brought a policy or a scheme called A. Now a group of legislature or any legislature, single legislature as well, if he or she feels that it is not the A policy that will serve the purpose of poverty alleviation, but there is another policy B or another scheme B which will involve lesser amount of expenditure and will bring effective outcome, then he can express his displeasure by moving this policy cut, right? And if policy cut is moved, the meaning of policy cut is that what you call the amount, he will ask that okay, for this scheme, for the implementation of scheme, if you have asked like 5,000 crores, right? So you reduce this amount, this 5,000 crore to 1 rupee. Mind you, I am saying to 1 rupee. Reduce to whatever demand of grant that you have moved. I hope you know the meaning of demand of grant. So demand of grant is nothing. It is sought by every ministry, right, to fulfill whatever obligation, whatever or development obligation or whatever other salary obligation that they may have, right? So ministry, support Ministry of HRD, right? So they will generate demand of grant, suppose 20,000 crores. So they will have different heads, right? So for payment of salary, right, I will spend 2,000 crore. For payment of some development scheme, educational development scheme, right, I'll spend another 6,000 crore. For giving any kind of aid to minority added school and college, I'll spend another 6,000 crores, right? So under different heads, right? So these are nothing, these 2,000, 6,000, 6,000. So these are nothing but demand of grant, right? So when policy cut is moved, they will simply say that whatever demand of grant that you have made, right, that should be reduced to 1 rupee, not by, right, not by to 1 rupee. Now in 1 rupee, when budget allocation has been 1 rupee for a particular scheme, that scheme cannot run, right? Can you run any scheme in 1 rupee, right? So that is the meaning of policy cut. In policy cut, whatever demand of grant, if policy cut is adopted against demand of grant of any ministry, right, the amount allocation will be reduced to 1 rupee. So this 1 rupee is nothing. Ultimately you are calling out that the policy is so bad that we can't grant whatever amount that you have asked for, we can grant only 1 rupee. So that is nothing but that is just disenchantment, legislature's disenchantment or legislature unhappiness with that policy, right? So policy cut, you would have understood, means complete denial of that policy, right? What is this economy cut? So I hope you would be knowing the meaning of economy. So we talk about, right, that we are trying to bring economy in the budget, right? So you have budget, right, and trying to bring economy means कितना आप कम कर सकते हो, कितना सस्ता करवा सकते हो. If you have like if you are going on a tour and you have planned to spend 10 lakhs, right? So bringing economy will mean that okay, transportation में थोड़ा सा कम किया जा सकता है क्या, right? Hotels के expenses हैं उसमें थोड़ा सा कम किया जा सकता है क्या, traveling में जो logistic का cost होता है उस पे थोड़ा सा. So you will what you are essentially trying to do is that you are trying to bring the economy, right? So when you are trying to bring economy, so suppose MHRD has asked for a particular scheme. So for a particular scheme, suppose say for the minority educational institution aid, right, minority educational institution aid, suppose this ministry has asked the 6,000 crore should be given to us, right? Now a legislature, if he moves the economy cut, right, he will say no, 6,000 crore is not enough, sorry, 6,000 crore is more than enough, right? You do one thing, you just manage with the 4,000 crores, right? So this is nothing, you are trying to bring, that legislature is trying to bring economy in the expenditure, Economic cut means the demand of grant made against particular policy be reduced by a specific amount. In this case, it was 2000 crores, right, by a specific amount. In policy cut, the total amount that your legislatures were approving was 1 rupee, only 1 rupee, right. In the economic cut, you are reducing that demand of grant by a specific rupee. In this case, it is 2000 crore. In token cut, what is the meaning of token? So the dictionary meaning of token, if you would be knowing, it is nothing but symbolism, right. So token cut, tokenism, you would have heard this tokenism, that person is doing tokenism, that person is doing symbolism. Meaning of tokenism is that in real life it will not bring any difference. So this is the image, right. So you have here Prime Minister who is doing this brooming activity on street, right. But everybody know that Prime Minister cannot indulge in this cleaning activity every day, but it does deliver a message on Swachhata, cleanliness, the importance of hygiene, that hey, Prime Minister of that country took the broom and he indulged in this sanitation drive. So it is nothing but it is a symbolic message. So this tokenism also is nothing, this token cut is also nothing, this is just symbolism. In token cut, what happens is that that is nothing again, that is symbolism. So if a legislature or group of legislature is not happy with any work of the government, but they don't want to disapprove that policy, they do not want to disapprove the scheme, but they want their presence at least to be felt. So in order for their presence to be noticed, right, for the symbolism, for the tokenism, what they will ask is that whatever demand of grant that you have made, just reduce the demand of grant by 100 rupees. So suppose if you have asked for 100 rupees for the implementation, although in 100 rupees nothing, but I am taking just a hypothetical example. So suppose if you have asked not 100 rupees, suppose 500 rupees, if you asked for the implementation of a particular scheme, you reduce 100 rupees out of that 500 rupees and then you run your scheme, right. So this is nothing, the demand of grant would be reduced by, if this motion is adopted, then the demand of grant will be reduced by what you call reduced to 400 rupees, right. So 100 rupees, although the schemes, whatever demand of grant that happens in amount of tune of crores, right, and in tune of crore, if you reduce the amount by 100 rupees, right, that is nothing, that is just a symbolism, right. So I hope these three, what is this policy cut, what is this economic cut, what is this token cut, right, you would have understood. But now the question that you should be raising is that can any member of opposition, can any group of legislature from the opposition can get these motions passed, because for motion to be passed they need this simple majority, right, simple majority in the house, that will be 272 votes around. Now if they have this number, if any member of the opposition or any party does have that number, he will be in government, right. So the point is that nobody, no legislature can get, means from the opposition, no legislature can get these motions adopted, because if this motion is adopted and passed by any legislature, if he manages to get this number, right, that would essentially mean that the government of that day does not have this number, and if that party, if that government, the incumbent government does not have that number in the Lok Sabha, then they do not have any right to be part of government. Council of Ministers will have to resign, right. So if any of these motions are passed, right, Council of Ministers, that will express that the government does not have this number, and if they do not have that number, they do not have any right to continue to be part of Council of Ministers, and then Council of Ministers will have to go. So I hope what is the importance of this motion you would have understood. The token, okay, the question here again is what happens if any of these cut motion is passed, right. So since cut motion are passed by the simple majority, a passage of cut motion reflects government lack of numbers in the parliament, so it would have to, it should resign as per article 75(3). What it says, 75(3), the executive will remain part of government, or any party will remain part of government as long as they enjoy the confidence of the Lok Sabha, right. So in this case, if the opposition does have this number, that means the incumbent government, the existing government will not have this number and they will have to go. right? So I hope this motion you would have understood. Let us move to the next slide and let us discuss the next leg of this lecture, and that is different type of leaders in the house. So you do have these three kind of leaders, primarily three kind of leaders that is present in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, that is leader of the house, then leader of opposition and leader of whip. Leader of whip. While discussing this leader of whip, we will also discuss what is this whip, although what is this whip concept has already been discussed when we were discussing the election of president, right? So there we had discussed this whip and why this use of whip, how it interferes with the independent functioning of member of parliament. So we had discussed that there as well, but we'll have a brief discussion here as well. And as far as detailed discussion of brief this whip is concerned, we'll discuss it when we'll discuss the 10th schedule, that is a dedicated chapter on anti-defection, right? So there we'll discuss this whip thing in detail. Here in this chapter we'll have just a brief discussion on whip, right? So leader of whip. So these three kind of leaders of the house, leader of opposition and leader of whip, we are supposed to discuss in this video. So let us start discussing this leader of house. So who will be leader of house and what is his role, we'll understand here. So this leader of house has not been mentioned in the constitution, right? This strike through means this is not mentioned in the constitution, but it is mentioned in the rules of procedure. Rules of procedure of both Lok Sabha and rules of procedure of this Rajya Sabha. Means leader of house belongs to both Lok Sabha as well and Rajya Sabha as well, I hope. So in Lok Sabha, who will be the leader of the house? So in Lok Sabha, if the prime minister belongs to the Lok Sabha, so right now you have Narendra Modi, he belongs to the Lok Sabha, right? So if the prime minister belongs to the Lok Sabha, he'll automatically become leader of Lok Sabha, right? But in case prime minister does not belong to the Lok Sabha, so you had this ex prime minister, right, Manmohan Singh, who for all 10 years, who for all 10 years, right, he was from Rajya Sabha from the Assam. So in this case he was not from the Lok Sabha, right? So any cabinet minister appointed by this prime minister, he will be leader of the Lok Sabha. Let me repeat it. If the prime minister belongs to the Lok Sabha, he'll automatically become leader of the Lok Sabha. But if he does not belong to what you call Lok Sabha, then any person appointed by him in the Lok Sabha will be leader of the Lok Sabha or the leader of the house, right? That was about Lok Sabha. In Rajya Sabha, again same rule. If the prime minister belongs to there, right, generally that does not happen, but you had Indira Gandhi as well for small stint, right? She was from the Rajya Sabha initially. Thereafter you had one another prime minister in 98 or 99, right? He was also from the Rajya Sabha. So if the prime minister is from Rajya Sabha, again he will automatically become the leader of the Rajya Sabha. If the prime minister belong to the Lok Sabha, in that case any cabinet minister appointed by him in the Rajya Sabha, he will become the leader of the house of the Rajya Sabha, right? I hope this concept you would have understood. In Rajya Sabha, any minister belonging to the Rajya Sabha nominated, so that person should belong to Rajya Sabha as well. So in Rajya Sabha, any minister belonging to the Rajya Sabha nominated by the prime minister who is member of Lok Sabha, right, becomes leader of the Lok Sabha. Now what is the role of this leader of the house? So how the business will be allocated? You have this business advisory committee, right? In business advisory committee, when we'll discuss this committee system, right, we'll discuss what is this business advisory committee, right? So business advisory committee is part of a standing committee, right? So speaker will be the chairman of this business advisory committee, right? And chairman, in case of Rajya Sabha, he will be chairman of this business advisory committee, right? So you will see whatever business allocation means in a particular session, what will be the length of that session? How many sittings? 20 sittings is needed, or 30 sittings is needed, or 40 sittings is needed, depending on the amount of bills that is pending. So that is decided although by speaker. The decision will be taken by speaker, but he or she will take the decision on the length of session or the business hours of the session, right? That he will take with the communication from the leader of the house. So the business allocation, what will be the business allocation, right? How many sittings there will be, what will be the length of sittings, right? That is decided by now. On the day-to-day basis as well, you will see, right, how much time should be allocated to the debate, how much time should be allocated to the discussion, how much time should be dedicated to the discussion on a particular bill, right? So what transactions should happen on a particular day, although again the final decision will be taken by the speaker or chairman, but it is the leader of the house, right, who will decide, because these people, these leader of the house, right, they have been elected, they are the part of government, and it is their duty to decide what discussion is important or how much business should be transacted, right? If they want to reduce this sitting for 10 days, 5 days, they can do it, right? No issues, but then their efficiency will reduce, right? Their workload for the next session will increase, right? People will think that this government is not working much, right? They'll have to respond in the people's court, right? So that's why all these responsibilities has been vested in the leader of the house. Important parliamentary functionary who decides business of the house. Business, what is this business? So lawmaking is a business, discussion, debate is the business. So how much time should be allocated for the lawmaking, how much time should be wasted for this discussion, how much time for the debates on important raising topics. Then his character and persona ultimately impact the performance of the parliament or performance of the house. So if you have any leaders like Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who believes in consensus, who believes in getting along all the parties together, so if you do have that kind of leader, then you will see that house will run smoothly. You will not have much noise, you will not have much wastage of the time of the house. The productivity of that house will remain high, right? Utilization of the time will remain high, right? So it ultimately depends on the character and persona of the leader of the house, whether he does indulge in the political vendetta, or he does have a smooth relationship with the other parties as well, right? So his character and persona directly impacts what you call the performance of the parliament. Daily and weekly business tracking is done by this leader of the house, that how many bills should have been discussed and how many bills were discussed actually in the first week, on the second week. So that is the job of the leader of the house. Once business of the house is over, he or she suggests that the head of the house, that is speaker or chairman, will be suggested by this person, that leader of house, to adjourn sine die the house, right? I hope you remember what is the difference between adjourn sine die and prorogue, right? So adjourn sine die is done by the speaker or the chairman, depending on the Rajya Sabha. This adjourn sine die announcement will be done by chairman, and in Lok Sabha it will be done by speaker of the house, right? So this adjourn sine die announcement is done by the speaker or chairman, but the suggestion is forwarded to him by the leader of the house, because ultimately it is the leader of the house responsibility to decide that how much business should be transacted in a particular session, how many bills should be, if they are not satisfied. So suppose earlier it was decided that this particular session will be of 20 days or 30 sittings, suppose, right? But due to wastage of time, because of this Shaheen Bagh issue or because of NPR or NSE, right, much of the time was wasted in the discussion on the debate on particular issue. And if the target was like 10 bill had to be passed, right, and if only 4 bill could have been passed, then this length of the sitting or this 20 days could be increased to the 30 days. That's how houses runs, right? So once business of the house is over, she or he suggests the head of the house to adjourn sine die the house. Speaker chairman request president to summon house on his request. So when right now this monsoon session will be called on, right, in coming 1 month or 1.5 months, right? So it will be done by the president, right? But speaker generally requests that, okay, you call this, summon this house, and who will be advised, means speaker will be advised by leader of the house. So what is the role of the leader of house? Who is leader of house? These factors you would have understood. Let us move to the next slide and let us discuss this leader of opposition, right? So this leader of house is clear, leader of opposition we will discuss, and thereafter leader of whip, right? So unlike this, like this previous case, this leader of opposition has also not been mentioned in the constitution. It has been mentioned in the rule books of the house. It does have a statutory backing, and the statutory backing was provided by an act brought by the parliament in 1977 by the Salary and Allowances of Leader of Opposition in Parliament Act 1977. So this post does have a statutory backing. And what is the statutory criteria of deciding this leader of opposition? Means which party will hold this leader of opposition post, LOP it is in short abbreviation it is said. That then which party can claim for the recognition of this LOP? So whichever, there is no statutory criteria that has been mentioned either in constitution or this act. There is no statutory criteria, be clear on this. But established political principle or established political convention has guided us that whichsoever party has this number, that is 55 in the Lok Sabha, right? So you do have the size of Lok Sabha, the total size is 550. So any party which does have this number, they can claim, right, this leader of the opposition. If more than one party does have this number, then the largest party, right? So suppose if one party does have 123 seats in the Lok Sabha and another party is 85, so both the parties are eligible, but this party will be given claim to this leadership of opposition post. But this 10% rule is not, again I am emphasizing, is not a statutory criteria. This was established first by the first speaker of the Lok Sabha, that is G.V. Mavlankar, that any party, if they do have this 10% rule, if they do have this 10% of the seat in the Lok Sabha, he or she, that party can claim that okay, this leader of my party should be given this position. But this criteria, let me tell you, this criteria is also called G.V. Mavlankar formula, right? This criteria at times has not been followed. So in 1984, you will see that TDP did not have this 10% of number, but still that TDP member of parliament was given. Means any party in that era in 1984, none of the party did have this number. Even despite it, in this 1984 is the time when Congress party had secured 416 seat in wake of Indira Gandhi assassination, right? Congress had secured this 416 seat, and it was in this wake that in 1988 you will see that you will have this anti-defection 10th schedule, right? It is because of this huge number and fear of this party getting split, because all the member of parliament could not be accommodated in the council of minister or any parliamentary secretary post. So you will see that in 1988 Rajiv Gandhi government will come up with this 10th schedule and with anti-defection provision. Now coming back to this topic, so in 1984 when you have this single party getting 416, then you can expect that none of the other party would be able to get this 10% of the number, right? So in that case, Congress opened its heart, right? And despite TDP not able to secure this 10% number, right, TDP member of parliament was given this leader of opposition. There have been at times where any party does have secured this during Indira Gandhi government. It has happened that the other party had secured this 10% seat, but they were not given this leader of opposition post, right? So this 10% criteria, you will see that political parties who have formed the government, right, they have followed or unfollowed this rule depending on their own political expediency, right? In 16th and 17th Lok Sabha, 17th Lok Sabha we have running from 2019, right? 16th Lok Sabha you had 2014 to 2019, right? So in 16th Lok Sabha the largest party was INC, and first time they secured in the 16th Lok Sabha they had secured, I guess, 44 seats, and in 17th Lok Sabha they have secured 52 seats. So this is clearly less than the required number, 55. So the ruling party did not recognize this leader, did not give this leader of opposition post, did not, means ruling party did not allow this party to claim this leader of opposition post, right? And the result is that in 16th and 17th Lok Sabha you do not have this leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, right? I hope you would have understood. Next point, what is the importance or what is the role of this leader of opposition? So the role of leader of opposition is to engage this ruling party in constructive dialogue. They have to keep all the opposition member united, right, so that they can have a constructive debate, they can have a constructive discussion on the matters of general public importance. They also ensure the accountability of executive towards the legislature, right. So along with the committee system, you can also add that the opposition member also hold them accountable through the question hour, through various debates and discussion, right. So to provide constructive criticism, he is also, means leader of opposition is also member of selection of, so other importance is that he is member of selection panel of various statutory bodies as well. So if you know, when we'll study NHRC, when we'll study CVC, when we'll study CIC, so these statutory bodies, right, how their heads are elected, right. So there would be a selection panel. That selection panel at times will consist of PM, it will consist of speaker, it will consist of leadership, leader of opposition, right. So there would be selection panel who will be selecting these NHRC head, right, CVC heads and CIC members, right, and there are other statutory posts as well, right, whose selection panel will have contribution from leadership, a leader of opposition. So if you want to see in what all selection panel leader of opposition participate, so it is in the election panel of the CVC, CIC, NHRC, Lokpal, right. It is these bodies in which selection panel of which this leader of opposition. So the one role is to engage ruling party or the government for in the constructive criticism, in the dialogue, in the discussion, in the debate for the matters of public importance, and the another very important role is that they do participate in the election panel of these statutory bodies. So I hope this leadership, leader of opposition would also be clear to you, right. Let us discuss this leader of whip, and before discussing this leader of whip, let us discuss whip as a concept. So let us discuss what is this whip. So whip is nothing but an order, a diktat that is issued by political parties or political party head to its member of parliament or member of legislative assembly. So this whip is applied both at the central level and the state level as well. Let us discuss how it happens at the central level. So if suppose a discussion on a particular very important bill is to schedule on 2 days down the line, suppose in monsoon session, suppose 2 days down the line, discussion on very important bill is to happen, right, and if the ruling party wants that bill to be passed, right, so they can issue a whip, right, and they can ask all its members to remain present in the house and vote in a certain manner. Means in this case, for this bill, they will ask that okay, you will vote for this particular bill, while the opposition member, they can also issue this whip to their member, and they can also ask that you have to remain in the house and you have to vote against the government, against that bill, right, depending on whatever stand they do have on that particular bill. If they also feel, any of the party does feel that the whatever bill that has been brought by the government, right, that bill is right. So for example, on 370, government supported this bill because it had been brought by them only, right, but along with the government you had smaller parties like AAP, BSP, BJD, right. So these parties as well supported this bill. So depending on what is their stand, right, they will support or oppose. So the meaning of whip is simply that this whip is nothing but an order issued by political parties to its member in the parliament, in Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha both, right. So you do have for every party, suppose SP, BSP, right, they do have certain member in Lok Sabha, they do have certain member in Rajya Sabha. So every party does have a leader of whip in both the houses, right, and the job of leader of the whip is to issue this whip and to maintain the discipline by its members. So that is the two job of leader of whip. If I talk about what are the types of whip, so you do have 3 type of whip, that is 1 line whip, 2 line whip, 3 line whip. What is the meaning of this 1 line whip, 2 line whip and 3 line whip? So in 1 line whip, leaders or member of parliament will simply be informed that yes, on a particular day this bill, the discussion on that bill is to happen, right, and you have to remain present. Although a liberty is given, if 1 line whip is being issued, right, a liberty can be given that okay, you have to remain present in the house during the discussion, but if you do not want to follow the party line, right, you can abstain at the time of voting, right. You will not go against the party line, you can simply abstain, means you can walk away at the time of voting, right. However, member can choose to abstain. So that is one liberty that has been given by one line whip. So if a party issues this one line whip, right, their member does have this liberty. What is this two line whip? So in two line whip, directs member to remain present during the voting. However, no instruction is given to the member about manner of the voting. So what manner they should vote, right, that is not given in the two line whip. This three line whip, this is one of the strictest whip, in which they will be asked that you have to remain in the house, present as well, and you have to vote in a certain manner. So government will say that to its members. So right now BJP will say that if they are presenting the bill, they will say to its member that you have to support the bill. Opposition might say that no, you have to oppose this bill. So in this kind of whip, right, if three line whip is issued, right, directs its member to remain present in the house and vote in a certain manner, right. We'll see if any member of parliament violates this whip that has been issued by their party, what punishment he or she will be meted out, we'll see. Let us have a sample of that how whip looks like, right. So you have this BJP issues three line whip to Lok Sabha member of parliament for July 10, tells them to present in the parliament. And when you do have issuance of three line whip, right, so voting manner has also been guided to that particular member, right. On that particular day, generally the letter is issued, right, and that letter, copy of that letter will be forwarded. So he is the leader of whip for the BJP in Lok Sabha, right. So he will issue this letter on the party head, party letterhead. We'll see a sample of that whip, right, and it the copy of the letter will be forwarded to each member of parliament, right, and they will be advised on particular day. A verbal communication will be given to all member of parliament, although this written communication has been given that okay, you have to remain present. As far as voting is to concern, manner of voting, that okay, whether you have to oppose or support the bill, that will be communicated to them by verbal communication, right. Although written communication can also be given, but if when 370 abolition of 370 was announced, right, on that day party, even BJP party members did not know that this bill is to come, although whip had been issued, but they had no information that tomorrow or day after tomorrow our party head or home minister is going to bring any such bill. So the letter that had been issued to those members, right, they had just one information that you have to remain present. So the letter, the point, the conclusion is that the letter that has been issued by the leader of whip may contain the information about the manner of voting or may not contain as well. So I hope this point would be clear to you. Congress BJP whips issue whips to their member of Legislative Assembly ahead of trust vote in Madhya Pradesh, right. So this is the issuance of whip. If we want to see the sample of whip, right, so again Madhya Pradesh Bhajpa BJP had issued this kind of whip. So you are being directed, right, BJP is directing that all the honorable member of Legislative Assembly has to remain present in the house on this particular day, and Sarkar Dwara the government whatever confidence motion, no confidence motion that is being brought by the government, right, you have to say no, right, you have to virodh it, you have to protest against it. So you have to say that no, we do not support the government. So here the purpose means you have to remain in the house, right, so that has also been told, and manner of voting has also been communicated, right. If you want to see another sample of the whip, so here you do have, and here you do have a three line whip. So if you can notice, right, under every line here you do have three lines, right. The image is not clear, but under the whip that has been issued, right, so this is a three line whip. Under every line, if you could see, right, here you do have three lines, right. So that is what first line whip, second line whip, and third line whip, right. So type of whip you would have understood. Now let us see what happens if this whip is violated, right. So legislature, that is member of parliament or member of Legislative Assembly at the assembly level, he or she will be subjected. So if any leader member of parliament has violated this whip, right? So they had been directed, here BJP had directed that okay, you have to vote against the government, right? So if any member of legislative assembly, this was at state level, right? So if any member of legislative assembly, right, had voted to support the government that was of Congress, right, then the leader, the whip could have approached the speaker and could have suggested speaker to disqualify that member, right? So that is the punishment that can be meted to the person who is violating this whip or this order or this dictate. What are the other punishment that member can be subjected to? So here it is mentioned. We'll have a detailed discussion when we'll discuss this Schedule 10 or anti-defection. But anybody, if you do have interest, right, the content will have this information. When PDFs will be provided to you, you can read it, right? So this was about the whip, leader of whip. Nothing. Leader of whip is simply whosoever has been appointed by the party to enforce this discipline, to enforce, to provide these letter and to direct the member to vote in a certain manner, right? So that leader will be called leader of whip. Every political party appoints a leader of whip called party whip in both the houses to enforce party discipline and to enforce party dictate. Stated objective of having such leader is to maintain expected level of behavior from party leader, but the primary purpose is to get party heads dictate enforced through controlling manner of voting on any particular bill or motion. This leader of whip has neither been mentioned in the constitution, right? So it has not been mentioned in the constitution, not even in the rules of procedure of the parliament. While about the leader of opposition when we were discussing, or leader of house when we were discussing, you would have noticed that they were not mentioned in the constitution, right? They were not mentioned in the constitution, but they were mentioned in the rules book of Lok Sabha and rules book of Rajya Sabha. So that is one difference that we do have from leader of opposition and leader of house from this leader of whip. Here leader of whip has neither been mentioned in the constitution nor in the rules of procedure. So I hope these three kind of leaders you would have understood. Let us move to the next slide and let us discuss multifunctional role of parliament. If I talk about what is the basic role of the parliament, so your answer would be that okay, the law making is one of the basic function, then the development role that it does have, right, and then you do have some administrative and governance roles, right? It does have to run this mammoth administration and it has to govern this country. So these are the basic function, but beside these basic function that we just discussed, right, there are other functions as well that the parliament does perform, and that's why this heading that the multifunctional role of parliament. So as part of its judicial function, it does impeach few people. It does impeach president, it does remove vice president, it does remove speaker, it does remove Supreme Court judges, it does remove High Court judges, it does remove what you call deputy chairman, right? So that is the judicial function of, because while functioning, while impeaching, while removing these people, it functions as a quasi-judicial body, right? So this is what parliament does in its judicial function. Then what are the financial functions of the parliament? So as part of financial functions, right, it passes the budget and other kind of money bill and finance bill that under article 110 and 117, right, that it passes, right? Hope the financial role would be understood here. Then what is this constituent power of the parliament or constitutional function of the parliament? So as a constituent assembly, right, the law making body, it makes the law, right, but while performing this role, it can amend the constitution. So parliament solely, it is parliament alone which does have right to amend the constitution. In our case, unlike USA, right, where state can also initiate the amendment, our states, that is states like Bihar, UP, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, they cannot initiate what you call constitutional amendment. So as part of constituent power or as part of constituent function, it can amend constitution under article 368, right? Then it does have certain electoral power as well, so it does elect. So whosoever people, right, it had impeached or removed, right, it can elect president, vice president, speaker, deputy speaker, chairman, rather vice president is the chairman, then deputy chairman, right? So all these people are elected by the parliament, and it comes under what you call electoral power of the parliament. As part of electoral power, right, what you do have is that it does have power to regulate how member of parliament and member of legislative assembly are elected. So this parliament does have power, and that will fall under electoral power, right? So in pursuance of that electoral power, it has designed something called RPA Act 1950, then you have RPA Act 1951, right? Then for the president's election and vice president election, you have this Presidential and Vice Presidential Act, Election Act, right, 1952. So these are the things. So these are the things that is performed by parliament as part of multifunctional role of the parliament under this electoral power. Legislative, executive power, I don't need that we should be discussing, because this we have discussed in length. So under legislative power, it does make laws, right? So these are very basic functions, so we will not discuss this. So I hope this multifunctional role of the parliament would be clear. Let us have a textual representation. So as part of constituent power, we already have, parliament does have power to amend the constitution of India. This power of parliament of amending constitution is exclusive, right? It does not share this exclusive power with the state as happens in the USA. In USA, state also. So this is just a repetition. Then how constitution is amended? So constitution is amended under something called, some process called Article 368. There are some provision which are very flexible. Those can be amended by what you call this special majority only, but there are certain provision which impacts the federal features that can be amended only, that can be amended by special majority plus consent from half of the state, right? So that is how amended. How easy, difficult it is to amend the constitution, that we already have discussed while we were discussing that amendment chapter. Then parliamentary power to amend the constitution, is that absolute? No, it is guided by something called basic structure of the constitution, right? It is not absolute. So these are part of constituent power of the parliament. If I discuss this electoral power, so we already have discussed that it does elect vice president, president. Lok Sabha also elects speaker, deputy speaker. Rajya Sabha elect deputy chairman, right? Then it also has power to regulate election process of member of parliament and state assembly. We already have discussed. In pursuance of this power, you do have Presidential and Vice Presidential Act 1952. Then in pursuance of regulating the process of election of member of parliament and state assembly, it has designed something called Representation of People Act 1950-1951, right? So that was electoral power. Then you have something called financial power, budget making power, and money bill passes power, money bill passing power. Then you have some judicial power. As part of judicial power, it impeaches president, it removes vice president, right? Then power to remove Supreme Court and High Court judges. Then power to remove this chief election commissioner and CAG, right? Punish its member and outsider for the breach of privileges. So this is one information that we could not discuss on that master slide. So it can punish members, its own member of parliament, or outsider like media organization. When we were discussing this privilege motion and parliamentary privileges, we had seen that how Mohua Mitra, right, she had moved this privilege motion against the G News, and there have been occasions where editors have been punished, and punishment can range from monetary fine to a year of jail, right? So that was under the judicial power of the parliament. So I hope these things we would have understood. Let us move to the next slide and let us discuss other information. Legislative power and executive power, I don't feel that we need to discuss, because we had discussed this in length. So what is this quorum? So quorum is nothing, actually it is a minimum number of people or minimum number of members that is required in a house for that house to function. So suppose your parliament size is 540. Now you cannot have a situation where at any given day there is only 10 members present, right? So you cannot function with the 10 members. You cannot expect that only if 10 members are present on any given day, and if some business has to be transacted, how much discussion, how much quality discussion these 10 members can have, how much in-depth discussion these 10 members can have, right? So if any bill has to be passed, right, and that bill requires only ordinary majority, right, just with the approval of 6 member in this case, 6 member, a bill will be passed. So, do you expect this to be reasonable that 6 members are just approving a bill and that bill is being imposed on whole of the country? Would that be reasonable? No. And that's why you have something called quorum, whereby a minimum number has been prescribed, and unless a house does have that minimum number of members present on a particular given day, the house will not function, right? Without attendance of that minimum number, the house on that particular day won't function, right? So, the minimum number of member in any house for house to function. Quorum for Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha and assemblies as well I have included. So, that is 10%. 10% of what? The total house size, right? Total house size, not the effective house size. So, Lok Sabha, the total house size is 550, Rajya Sabha 250, right? So, what would be the 10%? Lok Sabha it would be 55 and in Rajya Sabha 25, right? So, Rajya Sabha will function only when on any given day, only when there are more than this 25 members present. Lok Sabha will function or will have transaction of business only when you have more than 55 members present on any given day, right? If on any given day in Lok Sabha this 50 or 54 members are present, Speaker will take the call that yes, he or she will simply adjourn the house for the for that particular day or for 2 hours, 4 hours, right? Whatever she or he feels suitable, that okay, in whatever time, right, this number, number can be managed above 55, right? For that time being, Speaker will adjourn the house. That will be similar case in Rajya Sabha. So, in Rajya Sabha, if this number is not present, the chairman will take the call that he or she, or the deputy chairman will take the call that he or she will suspend the business of the house for whatever time he feels apt, right? So, in Lok Sabha 55 member, Rajya Sabha 25 members. You have some smaller assemblies in our India as well, right? So, for example, Goa does have only 40 seats, Sikkim only 32 seats, Mizoram again 40 seats. Now, if you follow this 10% rule, right, in these smaller assembly, again the very purpose of having a healthy discussion, a quality discussion, a in-depth discussion will be defeated, because if you follow 10% rule here, right, 40, 10%, 4 member, again Sikkim 32 members, 3.2 means 4 members, in Mizoram 4 members, right. So, in such cases where assembly size is too small, right, this 10% rule is not followed, right. So, in that case the quorum would be of 10 members. Right. So, the conclusion is that either 10 member or 10%, whichever will higher, that will be followed, right. So, if you have smaller assembly size, there the minimum number of member of legislative assembly, because these sizes, smaller sizes are in case of assembly level, right. So, if 10 members are not present in this smaller assembly, business will not be transacted. No businesses in the house shall be transacted unless there is a quorum, right. So, I hope this quorum thing would be understood to you. Now, we start discussing types of fund, right. So, how many types of fund we do have in our constitution? So, mind you, these type of fund, we do have 3 type of fund that has been mentioned in the constitution. The first type is Consolidated Fund of India. Just a moment. So, the first type is that has been mentioned in article 266(1), that is Consolidated Fund of India. This is clause, right. So, article 266 clause 1, you have Consolidated Fund of India. Article 266 clause 2, public accounts, and article 267 you do have Contingency Fund. We will have a detailed discussion of what these funds are and what are the sources of funding this Consolidated Fund of India, what is the source of funding this public account, and what is the source of funding of this Consolidated Fund of India. As of now, just have the learning that all these 3 funds have been mentioned in the constitution, because you have direct articles which is talking about these funds, right. So, article 266, under article 266 you do have 2 kind of fund, that is Consolidated Fund of India and Public Account of India. then you would have Article 267 where you have contingency fund. So, let us take these type of funds one by one and let us discuss. So, first we will have discussion on Consolidated Fund of India, right. So, what is this Consolidated Fund of India? So, you have Article 266, and what is the sources of this Consolidated Fund of India, right. So, it is simply like a bucket, right, and there are different sources which will fill this bucket, right. So, what are those different sources, right. So, all the revenue that has been raised by the government of India that will land into this bucket of Consolidated Fund of India. Then taxes received either direct or indirect through corporation tax, through GST, whatever taxation that this government of India is levying and collecting, that will be credited again to Consolidated Fund of India. Loans taken, if you are taking loans from a foreign government or World Bank, right, those loans, incoming loans will also go to this Consolidated Fund of India. Now, if you have extended any kind of loan to any state government or any foreign entity, and if those people are paying you back any interest, that interest will also land into something called this Consolidated Fund of India's bucket, right. So, interest received against previous loan, etc., is deposited to Consolidated Fund of India. Let us have a revision. All revenue raised by government of India. So, if it is getting dividend from PSU, or if it is getting dividend from RBI, if it is getting any kind of profit from railway, right. So, all these funds will land into this Consolidated Fund of India. So, all revenue raised by government of India, taxes received, then loans taken or recovered, right. You had given loan earlier to any foreign entity, or now they are returning the loan to you. So, that loan will also land, or if you are receiving interest against the loans previously extended. So, all these things will land into what you call Consolidated Fund of India. Now, there is a rule. Rule is that if executive want to withdraw any single penny out of this Consolidated Fund of India, it has to have parliamentary approval for that, and that is why you would have seen that after the budget has been passed, right, after this demand of grant has been voted out, there is something called appropriation, that yes, whatever means demand of grant was that okay, Ministry of HRD had sought for this much amount, Ministry of Defence had sought for this much amount, right. So, that was demand of grant. After that demand of grant has been passed, right, there is something called Appropriation Act. Appropriation Act. What is the meaning of appropriation? I want to appropriate something, means I want to take that thing, right. So, executive is simply saying that okay, you have approved that amount for Ministry of HRD, you have approved that amount for the Ministry of Defence. Now, here the money is lying in the Consolidated Fund of India. Now, they will have to bring another act after passage of this budget, that is called Appropriation Act, means they are trying to appropriate some amount from this Consolidated Fund of India, and for that they need parliamentary approval, and if they need parliamentary approval, they will have to have this Appropriation Act passed, right. And once the Appropriation Act, so suppose the size of budget was something called 28 lakh crore, right. So, for this 28 lakh crore from this Consolidated Fund of India, executive will have to get this Appropriation Act passed, right. So, any expenditure from this fund require prior parliamentary approval. Hence, government makes Appropriation Act after demand of grant has been approved by the Parliament, right. So, any expenditure. Now, there are certain, as soon we are saying any expenditure from this fund, an impression can be created that you cannot pick up any penny out of this Consolidated Fund of India without Parliament. But there are certain cases, there are certain exceptions that has been provided in the Constitution itself. So, suppose there is something called charged expenditure. We already have discussed this charged expenditure. So, through an act, suppose if you decided, so right now, the special feature of this charged expenditure is that these kind of expenditure can be discussed in the House right? They can be discussed, but they cannot be voted. So there are certain constitutional functionary in our Indian constitutional scheme, like president, vice president, Supreme Court judges, and Supreme Court's expenses, then High Court judges pension, then speaker, right, deputy speaker, this deputy chairman, right, CAG, right. So these constitutional functionaries salaries are charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, charged on the consolidated. The meaning of charged expenditure is that their salaries will not be discussed, right. When you are appropriating, when you are moving that Appropriation Act regarding the other expenditure, you had the discussion, right? You had the voting on that Appropriation Act. But as soon you have declared that there are certain expenditure is charged expenditure, right? Parliament cannot have the voting on that charged expenditure. Means your separate act. So suppose for last year Supreme Court expenses in total was 200 crores. Now this year they are asking for 300 crores. So Parliament can have discussion, right, but they cannot. Means if they have sought this 300 crore, they will be given 300 crore without voting. That is the meaning of charged expenditure, and that is one exception of this provision, that any expenditure from Consolidated Fund of India requires voting. That is one exception. So exception to this voting for withdrawal from Consolidated Fund of India for charged expenditure, salary of the Supreme Court judges, salary and expenses of the Supreme Court vice president, president, speaker, deputy chairman, CAG, right, etc., right, those are charged and they will not be voted on. So whenever you are getting amount for these people, getting amount from Consolidated Fund of India, you will not, means as the executive, you need not to pass a separate act like Appropriation Act that you had done for approval of or for getting amount for the demand of grant, right. So I hope that this Consolidated Fund you would have understood. Let us move to next slide and let us discuss public accounts committee, public accounts, right. So public account, again article 266, the same article in which Consolidated Fund of India has been discussed, just the clause has been changed. That was in clause 1, this is in clause 2. Fund lying in the public account come from sources which has to be paid back, right. In this case government is not the owner, right. So what are the sources of public accounts, right. So small saving fund, right, Kisan Vikas Patra, right, that post office, whatever scheme this post office banks run, right, for the small saving, right, that amount comes to the government and that will lie into public account. But here in this case, whenever there is small saving scheme or cesses or this PPF or PF, it is generally said, right. So what is the PF, you already would be knowing. So whenever you have this salaried person in private or government organization, right, so a part of their salary goes toward the provident fund, and equal amount of provident fund is paid by the owner of that company, and that keeps depositing, right, and that deposit will go to this public account. But as soon this person who is employed in this company, right, whenever as and when he or she will require this PF, right, government will have to give it back. So government in this case, in the previous case, right, Parliament was owner of this Consolidated Fund of India. But this case, public accounts case, government here is mere custodian of all these amounts. So this whatever PF has come, whatever amount has come through the cesses, whatever amount that has come by small saving schemes, that so you have this Kisan Vikas Patra, I already told you, Kisan Vikas Patra. You have this Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana. So these are nothing but small saving schemes that is run by government, post offices or a smaller organization, right. So here whatever amount is coming through these sources, right, they will lie for a smaller period, and as and when these people ask, means depositor ask, right, that amount can be, what is the purpose of cess? So cess is meant for, cess is nothing but a kind of tax, but the purpose is defined. So you have this Prarambhik Shiksha Yojana, right, Shiksha Yojana, right. Then you can have cess on road development tax kind of cess, right? So the purpose would already be defined, right? So you are collecting this road development tax from the new vehicle buyers, right? And you will deploy this road development tax on the development of roads or for the protection of environment, because these vehicles are causing pollution. So the purpose of cess would already be defined, that this cess would go to what you call for the development of road or for the protection of environment. So as and when that scheme requires, right, that amount had to be paid back. So my point was that in this case, in public account case, parliament or government is acting just as a banker or custodian for these people, right? So government is mere banker or custodian of these fund, and it has to be paid back as and when depositor or institutions demand it. PPF, small saving scheme, certain cesses like Prarambhik Shiksha course, road development cess, etc. are part of public account, right? The question that you can raise is that in previous case, Consolidated Fund of India case, Parliament approval was required, right? If any amount had to be withdrawn from the Consolidated Fund of India, you had that Appropriation Act, means parliamentary approval. But in this case, because government is mere custodian or banker, in this case, if government has to spend some amount towards any other purpose, they can well do that, but they will have to make sure that as and when these people, these depositor asks this amount, right, they need to be paid back in time, right? So in these cases, parliamentary approval is no. So if any amount has to be withdrawn from public account for any development purposes, right, parliamentary approval is not required, right? If government is temporary custodian of these funds, can government use it to pay any debt or obligation? Yes, government can use it, right? But when depositors seek money back, government must pay it back, right? So I hope sources of public accounts would be clear to you, sources of consolidated fund would be clear to you. So article 266 is over. Now we are moving to something called contingency fund, right? So contingency, the meaning of dictionary meaning of contingency, you would be knowing, right? Some fund to tackle the unforeseen circumstances. So right now you had this Nisagra, you had this AMFAN, right? So the custodian of this contingency fund is president, right? The president, it will lie at the disposal, this fund will lie at the disposal of president, right? And the limit of this contingency fund is also defined by Act of Parliament, that is 500 crores, right? What is the source of this fund? 500 crores. So in public account, we saw that the money was coming from some sources. Then in Consolidated Fund of India as well, we saw that money was coming from some source. But here the source is not external, but source is internal. This 500 crores will come from Consolidated Fund of India, and it will lie at the disposal of president. And if president feels that to tackle any unforeseen circumstances, so suppose he is in a visit to West Bengal, now he is visiting any panchayat, and if he saw that the condition of people due to this Amphan cyclone is very miserable, in that case, if panchayat member asks him for the 50 crores or 25 crores, now he is the president of India, right? He also need to have some authority, right? Although we discussed that the president is simply ceremonial head, right? It is the real executive is prime minister, but to this ceremonial head as well, you need to have some respectable fund at his disposal as well, right? So in that case, president can say, yes, no issues, I am granting 15 crore or 10 crore or whatever means amount that he desires, right? He can fix that amount. So suppose 10 crores, right? But the problem is that he will not carry that 10 crore, right? It is the finance secretary, Department of Economic Affairs of Ministry of Finance. He does have custody of this this contingency fund, right? So president will simply direct this finance secretary that yes, it is my promise to spend this amount there, right? You can send this amount. So check will be sent to that person. So contingency fund, money to this account is does not come from any specific source, but from Consolidated Fund of India. The limit is 500 crores, lies at the disposal of president, and it is the finance secretary which does have actual custody, right, of this established by Contingency Fund of India Act 1950, right. So, it has been established by an act. Fund for any emergent situation, president in any state visit, village headman demand 15 crore to handle any suddenly emerged crisis, right. So, COVID crisis, crisis due to Amphan in West Bengal or Nisagra cyclone in Maharashtra. So, to tackle these kind of situation, president can approve, right, and rather prime minister as well can approve, right, but prime minister will have to in that case suggest to president, right, president that okay 100 crores should be given to Odisha or 200 crores should be given to West Bengal, right. So, real authority, although in this case in president, because amount, one care that has to be taken that as soon some amount has been spent out of this contingency fund, out of so suppose in any given year 400 crore was spent, right. So, next financial year, next budget session that we will have, right, in that budget session this contingency fund has to be refilled by this 400 crore that has been spent in the previous year. So, every year during budget session this bucket is recharged for the next year, and recharge would be by 500 crores, right. Does government require approval from parliament for expenditure from this fund? No, government does not require any kind of approval from. So, government in case of public accounts and in case of contingency fund, right, government does not require any parliamentary approval. I hope these points you would have understood. So, this was the last leg. We do have some MCQ based on whatever topic that we have discussed. So, this is the first MCQ, this is the second MCQ, this is the third MCQ, fourth MCQ, fifth MCQ, oh only fourth MCQ, 4 MCQ we do have, okay. So, we do have these 4 MCQ that I expect you to attempt. So, with this we are wrapping up this parliament chapter. Budget I have left, and budget I have intentionally left because budget from my understanding is not a polity topic, right. You can simply browse any of the budget chapter from the Murnal sir. He is a top notch economic lecture. So, Murnal Patel's economy budget section you can browse for, right. He has explained it in very good manner, right. So, that is the only topic from the parliament that we are leaving, right. So, for the parliament we are wrapping up this lecture. Our next lecture we will have on the parliamentary committees, right. Committee we had in this parliament chapter as well, but committees we will have in length discussion when we will discuss this parliamentary committees. So, till then, bye bye.